I want to pause here. I made the decision to visit my wife's lover at his apartment, the same apartment I had been unknowingly paying for through our joint account for the past 18 months. But when I knocked on that door, and he answered, wearing my favorite whiskey-colored cardigan that had mysteriously disappeared from my closet last Christmas, I felt something inside me break and rebuild at the same time. Let me back up. My name is Robert Mitchell, and at 62 years old, I thought I had life figured out. I'd retired from my position as a senior civil engineer 3 years ago after 40 years of building bridges, literally and figuratively. My wife, Catherine, was 58 and still working as a regional director for a pharmaceutical company. We'd been married for 37 years. We had 2 children, David, 34, a corporate attorney in Boston, and Emily, 31, a marketing executive in Chicago. We lived in a comfortable home in Westchester County, New York, a 4-bedroom colonial with a garden I'd spent my retirement cultivating. Catherine traveled frequently for work, sometimes gone for weeks at a time. I didn't mind. I had my woodworking shop in the garage, my vegetable garden, and my Wednesday night poker games with the guys from the old firm. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? 37 years of marriage. We'd weathered my father's death, her mother's long battle with Alzheimer's, David's rebellious teenage years, Emily's divorce 2 years ago. We were solid. Or so I believed. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in late September. Catherine had left for a conference in Dallas. She'd be gone for 5 days, she said. I was in the kitchen making my morning coffee when her iPad, which she'd left on the counter, pinged with a message. I wasn't snooping. The screen was facing up. The notification was right there. Can't wait to see you tonight. I've missed your skin. The sender was listed as Mark, colleague. My hand froze on the coffee pot. I stared at those words. Read them again and again. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a spam message. Maybe it was meant for someone else. Maybe Mark was... what? What innocent explanation could there possibly be for I've missed your skin? I picked up the iPad. I knew her passcode. It was our wedding anniversary. She'd never changed it in all the years she'd had the device. My hands were shaking as I entered the numbers. The messages opened like a wound. Months of conversations. Hundreds of messages. They started casual enough last March, discussing a work project. Then they shifted. Compliments about her presentation skills. Comments about her beautiful mind. Then about her smile, her laugh, her eyes. By June, they were meeting for drinks after conferences. July, there were messages about hotel rooms. August brought explicit content that made me feel physically ill. My wife, my Catherine, writing things to this man that she hadn't said to me in years. I sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours, reading every single message, learning about my wife's affair, in real time, through her own words. They'd been together for 18 months. They'd been together in 6 different cities: Atlanta, Seattle, San Diego, Phoenix, Dallas, Denver. Every business trip she'd taken in the last year and a half had included him. Mark Patterson, 39 years old, regional sales manager, divorced, no kids, living in Manhattan. Catherine had helped him find his apartment. My wife had spent hours looking at listings with him, discussing neighborhoods, suggesting furniture. The apartment in Murray Hill, monthly rent, $4,000. Paid through automatic withdrawal from our joint checking account, listed as professional development expenses. I'd been paying for my wife's lover's apartment for 18 months. I made myself breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique I'd learned in therapy after my brother died in a car accident 20 years ago. I needed to think clearly. I needed to be smart about this. Because there was something else I'd found in those messages. Something that made my blood run cold. Catherine and Mark weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. They talked about her leaving me, about waiting until I was settled in retirement, about how they'd split the assets. Mark had encouraged Catherine to move money into accounts I didn't know about, to redirect some of her bonuses and stock options. In one message from 3 weeks ago, Catherine had written, "Robert is so content in his little world of gardening and woodworking. He won't even fight for anything. This will be easier than I thought. I'd been married to this woman for 37 years, and she thought I was too complacent to fight for my own life. She was about to learn differently. I spent that afternoon in my woodworking shop, but I wasn't building anything. I was planning. I've built bridges for 4 decades. I know how to engineer solutions to complex problems. I know how to identify weak points in structures and reinforce them. I know how to document everything and build a case that will hold up under scrutiny. First, I took screenshots of every message, thousands of them. I backed them up to 3 different cloud services and emailed them to myself at an email address Catherine didn't know about. Then I photographed every page of our financial statements, account information, property deeds, investment portfolios. Catherine came home on Sunday evening, 5 days later. She walked in with her rolling suitcase, looking tired but radiant in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her hair was different, softer somehow. She was wearing new perfume. "How was Dallas?" I asked, helping her with her coat. "Exhausting," she said, kissing my cheek. "But productive. How was your week?" "Quiet," I said. "I spent most of it in the garden. The tomatoes are finally coming in." "That's nice, honey." She was already walking toward the stairs, pulling her phone from her purse, probably to text him that she was home safe. I watched her go. This woman I'd built a life with. This stranger. That night, I lay beside her in our bed, listening to her breathe, and wondered when exactly I'd lost her, or if I'd ever really had her at all. The next morning, I drove into Manhattan. I'd made an appointment with a divorce attorney. Patricia Chen had been recommended by my poker buddy, Dennis, whose own divorce 3 years ago had been brutal. "She's a shark," Dennis had said. "You want her on your side." Patricia's office was on the 42nd floor of a building in Midtown. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, impeccably dressed. She listened to my story without interruption while I showed her the screenshots on my tablet. "Mr. Mitchell," she said when I finished, "I need to ask you something important. What do you want from this?" "I want what's fair," I said. "Fair isn't always what people get in divorce court. I'm asking what you want specifically. Do you want to reconcile? Do you want revenge? Do you want to protect your assets? Do you want her to hurt the way you're hurting?" I thought about that. About Catherine's message. "He won't even fight for anything." "I want her to understand that she made a mistake," I said. "I want my fair share of what we built together. And I want to make sure she doesn't get away with hiding assets." Patricia smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just been given an interesting puzzle to solve. "Then we need to move quickly and quietly. Don't let her know you know. Not yet. We need to secure your financial position first, document everything, and build an airtight case." "Can you do that? Can you live with her, sleep next to her, pretend everything is normal while we prepare?" I thought of those messages, those hotels, that apartment. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." Over the next 6 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. By day, I was Robert, the retired engineer who puttered in his garden and worked on woodworking projects in his garage. I made Catherine her coffee in the morning. I asked about her day. I smiled when she kissed me goodbye before another business trip. By night, I was something else. A detective, a strategist, a man who'd been pushed too far. I hired a private investigator. His name was James Riley, former NYPD, now running his own firm. He was thorough. Within 2 weeks, he'd documented 5 separate occasions when Catherine had met Mark at the Murray Hill apartment during what she'd told me were client dinners or late meetings. The photographs were damning. Catherine entering the building at 7 p.m., leaving at 11 p.m., Mark greeting her at the door with wine. The two of them visible through the 3rd floor window, embracing. James also discovered something else. Mark Patterson had a history. This wasn't his first workplace affair. He'd been involved with another married woman at his previous company, a relationship that had ended when her husband had shown up at Mark's office and caused a scene. Mark had been quietly transferred to avoid scandal. "This guy's a predator," James told me, sliding the folder across his desk. "He targets married women, especially ones with money. The other woman, She ended up losing half her assets in the divorce, and Mark walked away clean. Not this time, I said. I opened a separate bank account and started redirecting my pension deposits there. I moved some of our joint investments into my name only. Nothing illegal. Everything, Patricia advised. We were just protecting assets that were rightfully mine. I also started documenting Catherine's movements and expenses. The professional development account that was paying for Mark's apartment, the mysterious charges to hotels on nights when she claimed to be at conferences, but the conferences had ended days earlier. The jewelry purchases I'd never seen her wear. The designer handbag that cost $6,000. All of it went into the file Patricia was building. Meanwhile, Catherine seemed happier than she'd been in years. She was home more often, but distracted. She'd sit at dinner, smiling at her phone. She bought new clothes. She started going to the gym 4 times a week. She was planning a future that didn't include me, and she thought I was too oblivious to notice. The confrontation I'd been planning came on a Saturday in early November. David and Emily were coming for Thanksgiving in a few weeks, but I'd asked them to come early. Family meeting, I'd said. Important. They arrived together, having met up in the city and driven out together. David in his usual suit, even on a weekend. Emily in jeans and her business casual sweater. They both hugged Catherine, who was delighted by the surprise visit. They both shook my hand with the kind of casual affection that adult children give their parents. We sat in the living room. Catherine made tea. I waited until everyone had a cup before I spoke. I need to tell you all something, I said. Your mother is having an affair. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine's cup clattered against the saucer. What? Robert, what are you talking about? I'm talking about Mark Patterson, I said calmly. I'm talking about the apartment in Murray Hill that we've been paying for. I'm talking about the hotel rooms in 6 different cities. I'm talking about 18 months of lies. David stood up. Dad, that's a serious accusation. You can't just... I have proof, I said. I pulled out my tablet and pulled up the screenshots. Thousands of messages, photographs, financial records, everything. I watched Catherine's face drain of color. I watched David and Emily lean forward to look at the screen. I watched their expressions change from disbelief to shock to something harder to define. Mom? Emily's voice was small. Is this true? Catherine looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in months. Robert, please. Can we talk about this privately? No, I said. They deserve to know. They deserve to hear from you why you've been lying to all of us. Catherine's hands were shaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. But it did happen, I said. For 18 months, you made choices. You lied. You stole from our joint accounts to pay for his apartment. You hid assets. You planned a future with him while telling me you loved me. David was reading the messages now, his lawyer's mind cataloging evidence. Emily was crying quietly. Did you ever love me? I asked Catherine. Or was I always just convenient? Of course I loved you, Catherine said. Her voice broke. Robert, I do love you. But I felt invisible. You retired and you had your garden and your projects, and you seemed so content. I felt like I was still fighting, still climbing, still trying to matter, and you were just done. So you started an affair with a man 20 years younger than you and embezzled from our accounts? I didn't embezzle. You took money from our joint account without my knowledge to pay for your lover's apartment, I said. That's financial fraud in a marriage. David looked up from the tablet. His face was pale. Mom, did you really move money into separate accounts? Did you hide assets? Catherine didn't answer. She didn't have to. Oh my God, Emily whispered. How could you do this to Dad? You don't understand, Catherine said. You're both grown. You have your own lives. I was drowning in this marriage, and Mark made me feel alive again. He made me feel seen. He made you feel seen? I asked quietly. Catherine, I see you. I've always seen you. I supported you through every promotion, every late night, every business trip. I took care of our home, our kids, our life, so you could chase your career. And you call that being invisible? She had no answer for that. The family meeting dissolved into arguments. David, always the lawyer, kept asking questions, building his own case. Emily kept crying and asking why. Catherine tried to explain, to justify, to make them understand. But there was no understanding this kind of betrayal. Finally, I stood up. "I've filed for divorce," I said. "Patricia Chen is my attorney. You'll be served with papers on Monday. I suggest you get your own lawyer." Catherine's eyes went wide. "Robert, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can." "No," I said. "We can't. You made your choice 18 months ago. I'm just making mine now." I left the room, left them all sitting there in the wreckage of our family. I went to my woodworking shop and I stood there among the tools and the sawdust and the half-finished projects, and I finally let myself cry. 37 years, gone. The divorce proceedings were ugly. Catherine hired an aggressive attorney who tried to argue that I'd been financially abusive by withdrawing funds from our accounts. Patricia countered with evidence of Catherine's affair and the money she'd been siphoning off from Mark's apartment. Catherine tried to claim the Murray Hill apartment expenses were legitimate business expenses. Patricia produced Mark's lease agreement, which listed Catherine as a co-signer and emergency contact. "Business expense?" Patricia had said in court, her voice dripping with disdain. "Mr. Patterson isn't even her employee. He works for a different division of the company." The judge was not sympathetic to Catherine's position. But the worst part wasn't the legal battles. It was our children. David tried to be neutral at first, professional. But as more evidence came out, as he saw the extent of his mother's deception, he pulled away from both of us. Too angry at her to call. Too disappointed in me for airing our dirty laundry to want to talk. Emily was more forthright in her anger. She called me 2 weeks after the family meeting, her voice shaking with rage. "How could you do this to Mom?" she demanded. "How could I?" I was stunned. "Emily, did you read those messages? Did you see what your mother did?" "I saw a woman who was lonely and made a mistake," Emily said. "I saw you humiliate her in front of us. I saw you turn us against her. I didn't turn you against anyone. I showed you the truth." "The truth?" "Dad, you spent the whole marriage being boring and safe and predictable. Mom worked her whole life, built a career, and what did you do? You retired and played in your garden. Can you blame her for wanting something more exciting?" Each word was a knife. "Is that what she told you?" "She didn't have to tell me anything. I've watched you for years. You're content to just exist. Mom wants to live. And lying and cheating and stealing. That's living? Don't call it stealing. It was her money, too. She used it to pay for her lover's apartment, Emily. How is that not stealing from our marriage?" "You just don't get it," she said. "You never did." She hung up. I stood there holding the phone, wondering how I'd become the villain in this story. David called a week later. More measured than his sister, but the message was the same. "Dad, I think you need to consider dropping this," he said. "The divorce is going to get messy. The legal fees alone are going to be astronomical. And for what? To punish Mom? To prove you're right? To get what's fair," I said. "Fair?" David laughed bitterly. "Life isn't fair, Dad. You taught me that. Sometimes you have to compromise. Mom's willing to settle. 60-40 split. You keep the house. She keeps her retirement accounts. Clean break. She hid assets, David. She committed fraud. And you want me to just let it go?" "I want my parents to stop destroying each other," he said quietly. "I want to be able to invite both of you to my wedding next year without worrying about a scene. I want Emily to stop crying every night. I want our family back." "We don't have a family anymore," I said. "Your mother made sure of that." "No," David said. "You both did. She cheated. You chose scorched earth. You're both responsible for what happens next." He hung up too. I sat in my empty house and realized my children blamed me as much as they blamed their mother. Maybe more. Because I was supposed to be the steady one, the one who forgave, the one who put family first. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. The investigation into the hidden assets took 3 months. Patricia was relentless. She found accounts in the Cayman Islands, stock options that had been transferred to trusts I didn't know existed, life insurance policies, where the beneficiary had been changed from me to Mark Patterson. "Your wife was planning to divorce you and marry this man," Patricia told me. She'd been setting up her financial independence for years. long before the affair started. Years? I felt sick. The first hidden account was opened 7 years ago, right around when you started talking about early retirement. 7 years. She'd been planning to leave me for 7 years. The affair with Mark was just the catalyst, not the cause. In December, the judge ruled in my favor on most points. The house was mine. Half of Catherine's retirement accounts were mine. The money that had been hidden in offshore accounts had to be disclosed and divided. The money spent on Mark's apartment had to be repaid to me from Catherine's separate accounts. Catherine was ordered to pay my legal fees. It was, Patricia said, a decisive victory. It didn't feel like one. I spent Christmas alone. David was with his fiancée's family. Emily was with Catherine at some resort in Florida. Neither of them called. I sat in my woodworking shop on Christmas Eve, sanding a rocking chair I was building for a grandson I might never be allowed to see, and I wondered if winning was worth losing everything that mattered. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Mitchell, this is Mark Patterson. I nearly dropped the phone. What do you want? To apologize, he said. He sounded tired. I know it doesn't mean anything coming from me, but I need you to know I never wanted this to happen. You never wanted to have an affair with my wife and help her steal from our marriage? I didn't know she was married when we met, he said. She wasn't wearing a ring. She told me she was divorced. By the time I found out the truth, I was. He paused. It doesn't matter. There's no excuse. I just wanted you to know it's over. Catherine and I, we're done. Why? Because she's not who I thought she was, Mark said quietly. Because when the judge ruled against her, when it became clear she wasn't going to get the money she wanted, she blamed me, said I'd ruined everything, said I was supposed to make her happy, but all I'd done was destroy her family and her finances. She said that, among other things. I realized I was just a fantasy for her, a way out, and when the exit didn't look as good as she'd imagined, I became the problem. He laughed bitterly. I guess that's karma. I helped her betray you, and she betrayed me the second it was convenient. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you should know she's not doing well. The company asked her to resign. The affair, the legal battle, it all became too public, too messy. They gave her a severance package, but made it clear she needed to leave. She's angry. She's bitter. And she blames everyone but herself. That's not my problem anymore. No, Mark agreed. It's not. I wanted you to know I'm sorry, for what it's worth. He hung up. I sat there holding the phone, feeling nothing but a strange emptiness. Catherine had lost her job, lost Mark, lost the financial security she'd been building, lost our children's unconditional love, lost everything she'd gambled on. And I should have felt vindicated, satisfied, victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. January brought a thaw, both literal and figurative. Emily called, just once, brief, awkward. Dad, it's me. I know, sweetheart. I wanted to say. She paused. I've been thinking about things, about what Mom did, about what you said, and I think I was wrong to blame you. You were trying to protect your mother. I was trying to protect my idea of my mother, Emily said. The version of her I wanted to believe in. But she's been lying for so long, Dad. Not just about Mark, about everything. Did you know she told me you forced her to give up her career when we were born? That you made her choose between work and family? That's not true. I know that now. I found old letters, old photos. I saw how supportive you were, how you always encouraged her. She rewrote history to make herself the victim. People do that sometimes, I said gently. When they can't face what they've done, they create a narrative where they're not the villain. I'm sorry I believed her version instead of yours. You're her daughter. Of course you believed her. Will you? Emily's voice cracked. Will you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. You're my daughter. I love you. That hasn't changed. She started crying. We talked for an hour. Really talked. And when we hung up, something heavy I'd been carrying loosened, just a little. David took longer. He called in March, a week before his wedding. I'd like you to be there, he said stiffly. If you're willing to be civil, will your mother be there? Yes, she's my mother, Dad. I can't not invite her. I understand. I'll be there. And I'll be civil. The wedding was beautiful. David married a lovely woman named Sarah, someone I'd only met twice before. Catherine was there with a friend, another woman from her company. Not Mark. She looked older, tired. We nodded at each other across the room, but didn't speak. Emily stood next to me during the ceremony. She squeezed my hand when David said his vows. When he kissed his bride, she whispered, "Thanks for being here, Dad. Wouldn't miss it." I whispered back. At the reception, I danced with Emily. I shook hands with old colleagues who'd known Catherine and me as a couple and now struggled with what to say. I smiled and congratulated my son and his new wife, and tried not to think about how different this day would have been a year ago. Late in the evening, Sarah's grandmother found me. "You're Robert?" she asked. She was 90, if she was a day, sharp-eyed and elegant. "Yes, ma'am. My husband left me for his secretary 30 years ago," she said without preamble. "Took me years to recover, but I did. Built a life for myself, traveled, learned to paint, found love again at 70 with a wonderful man who'd lost his wife. Had 10 beautiful years before he passed." "I'm glad," I said, not sure why she was telling me this. "My point," she said, "is that this isn't the end of your story, young man. It's just the end of a chapter. Don't waste the rest of your book being bitter." She patted my hand and walked away. I thought about that a lot in the weeks that followed, about chapters and stories and what came next. In April, I sold the house in Westchester. It was too big, too full of ghosts. I bought a smaller place in Connecticut, near the water. A cottage with a workshop and a garden space. A new beginning. I started taking classes at the local community college. Welding, metalwork, things I'd never had time for during my career. I joined a woodworking guild and started making furniture to sell at craft fairs. I went on a few dates, nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with women who answered my online profile. It was awkward at first, dating at 63, but it was also kind of wonderful to discover I could still make someone laugh, still have conversations that lasted hours, still feel that spark of attraction. In June, I met Margaret. She was 60, a widow of 3 years. A former teacher who now volunteered at the library and took painting classes. We met at a craft fair where I was selling a dining table I'd built. She spent 20 minutes asking me about my process, my techniques, my inspiration. "You're very passionate about this," she said, smiling. "It's what I love," I said, and I realized it was true. Building things, creating. It made me happy in a way my engineering career never quite had. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" she asked. "I'd love to hear more about your work. We've been getting coffee twice a week for the past 2 months. Sometimes we talk about woodworking and painting. Sometimes we talk about our lost spouses and our complicated children. Sometimes we just sit and watch the water and don't talk at all. It's not love. Not yet. But it's something. A possibility. A chapter beginning." Emily visited me last weekend. She brought her new boyfriend, a kind man who works in nonprofit management and laughs at my jokes. We had dinner in my new kitchen, grilled fish on my new patio, walked on the beach as the sun set. "You seem happy, Dad," she said as we stood watching the waves. "I am," I said, and I meant it. "I'm glad. You deserve it." "So do you, sweetheart." "Have you talked to Mom recently?" "No. Have you?" "Sometimes." Emily kicked at the sand. "She's moving to Arizona, taking a consulting job, smaller company, less stress. She says she needs a fresh start. I hope she finds it." "Do you really mean that?" I thought about it, about Catherine and all those years and all that pain. "Yes," I said finally. "I really do. Hating her doesn't help me heal. Wishing her well doesn't mean I forgive what she did. It just means I'm choosing not to carry that weight anymore." Emily hugged me. "When did you get so wise?" "Around the time I realized winning the divorce didn't make me happy," I said. "Justice felt good for about a day. Then it just felt empty. But building this," I gestured at my cottage, my workshop, my garden. "Building a new life. That feels like actually winning." David called yesterday. He and Sarah are expecting a baby. A girl, due in January. We'd like to name her after Sarah's grandmother, he said. "But we were hoping you'd be involved. Be a real grandfather, if you want to be." "I'd like that very much," I said. "Good. Because Sarah's family is great, but they're not into building things. And I want our daughter to know her grandfather who builds bridges and furniture and new lives out of broken pieces." I started crying. Couldn't help it. "Thanks, son," I managed. "No, Dad. Thank you for showing me that you can survive betrayal without becoming bitter. For showing me that starting over isn't failure. For still being there, even when Emily and I weren't." After we hung up, I went to my workshop. I had a rocking chair to finish, a small one, child-sized. I'd started it weeks ago, long before I knew about the baby, just because I wanted to build something beautiful. Now it had a purpose. I worked late into the evening, sanding and staining and polishing, making something that would last, something that would rock my granddaughter to sleep, something built not from anger or pain, but from hope. This isn't the life I planned. It's not the story I thought I was writing when I married Catherine 37 years ago. It's not the ending I imagined during those dark months of discovery and divorce and loss. But it's my life, my story, my new chapter. And you know what? It's pretty damn good.